Tonight on Zadanza, we are once again joined by Kipp Davis, and I thought it would be just super fun to, of all things, expose him to J. Warner Wallace. So we're going to look at a video where Wallace talks about how being a detective helped him, I guess, investigate Jesus. All that and possibly more on
Zod, Kipp, Dan, Zed. I don't know. I'm Kipp Davis, and this is Zod's show.
Nailed it.
I even practiced it. I practiced very hard.
And it shows. It shows. You did it exactly the way we tried in rehearsal.
That's absolutely. So, hey, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on. It was a lot of fun last time, and so I really appreciate you coming back again. So,
of course. Well, when you said J. Warner Wallace, I just couldn't say no, because in truth, I've never covered anything by this guy, but for a long time, I've really wanted to. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. So when we were going to have you on, I was just looking for something that might be suitable for you to, apply your knowledge and stuff to, or just riff on from your angle. And so I looked him up. First thing I saw, sometimes he just talks about junk and weird, boring stuff, but I saw this one, like, we got to do this one. This one, he actually tells about how he applied. It's almost like he gives a lesson in applying detective methodology to New Testament scholarship. And I thought you might just have a couple thoughts about that.
Yeah, I have a few. And I mean, as far as I'm aware, based on some of the work that Michael Beverly did, his application of detective bullshit is probably more bullshit than actual things that detectives actually do. So, but who am I to say? I'm not a detective. So
yeah, we all uncovered the fact, of course, that he wasn't a cold case detective when he says he was, and so basically he wasn't using his years of hardened cold case experience to prove the gospel's true and all that. It's obviously silly from the start, but when the timeline was out there and he started doing damage control and all of a sudden adopting this weird semi-humility, it was pretty funny to watch. And it seems like maybe he opens this up with that too. Sorry, what was that?
No, I was just saying that was pretty funny. Honestly, that felt like a win. When all of that stuff happened, that kind of felt like, you're out here, we're out here. And sometimes it feels like we're fighting against the wind, because I'm at least waving my arms and shouting at people and telling them, to shut the fuck up about things that they don't know or understand, and nobody listens, right? They just don't listen. They keep going on doing the same old shit over and over again, and it gets frustrating, it gets tiresome. But it sort of felt like this when J. Warner Wallace finally had to face the music and make some sort of public statements. I'm gonna be honest, I felt like, yeah, way to go us. I mean, way to go you and some other people who shone light in the darkness. It felt like the right result to me. So I was happy about that.
I was too. It was weird. I was just responding to a video where he talked about his testimony, and I'm like, I wonder, is there a way just to find a little bit of information about that? And it's hard because the search results are so loaded up. Any combination, you just get tons of his material. But then I find this PDF of his commendation from the police. I'm like, wait a minute, this is interesting.
It's a trope at this point, though, right? Like, and this is the thing I kind of discovered when I did the when I did the documentary about Josh McDowell.
Mhm.
And it was after I did that, then I started listening a little bit more closely to Lee Strobel, and I'm like, wait a minute, like all these guys are just lying their asses off, and I'm starting, like, it sort of feels like, and honestly, it's not just that. Even years before, I don't know if you remember a name. This is going way back. The name of a man by the I think it was Ergen Kaner, used to be the president of either it was the Southern Baptist Conference or one of the seminaries, probably Southeastern, because I think Paige Patterson was the president of Southwestern since, the days of Noah. But he was like a Middle Eastern guy, Christian guy, really enigmatic, powerful speaker, and he had this like gripping testimony of being a Muslim who became a Christian, and he it's full of bad Islamic stereotypes.
Yeah.
One of the, and this was it was probably something like the Royce Report, but maybe even before the Royce Report got started, a Christian organization, maybe it was Cornerstone. It might have been Cornerstone Magazine did an expose, because they used to do stuff like this too, of this guy, showing that his entire backstory that he leaned hard into. He wrote a New York Times best-selling book and became a seminary president and a traveling speaker. Like, it's all bullshit. And I mean, there's more. Like, before that, Mike Warnke, do you remember that name?
Yeah.
And I mean, we don't have to go into it, but this is just what apologists do. Certainly those that incorporate their stories into their apologetics. So.
Yeah, I absolutely loved your Josh McDowell one, because his drove me crazy too. It always, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I attended a Josh McDowell thing at my college when I was in Campus Crusade.
Awesome.
And I did security for an event he had, which meant basically they gave me and one other
you're a
Crusader,
giant.
Yeah. They gave me and one other tall Campus Crusader black shirts that said security on the back and just told us stand there. We weren't really security. It was just but we did a whole thing. His whole thing was right from wrong, where there's actual right and wrong, and he had this young African-American guy traveling around with him to do the right from wrong rap, and he'd make it all cool for the kids and stuff. Beforehand, he would have a room with just like me and like maybe a dozen other like of the more senior Campus Crusade people, and did this special little presentation for us. And
oh, nice.
I felt a little assured by it, but even then, it always has this smell to it, even when you're a true believer. And I loved your story about his story, and then the thing where he leans back and goes, oh my God, it's true, or whatever, however he says. And the fact that he places that story in how many places is so awesome.
It's nuts. But it's that's Christian apologetics, right? And they don't care. And that's the thing, right? That is the thing. When I made the documentary, and I made sure it got into the hands of the McDowell family. So I know they've seen it, right? It's just like, I don't know necessarily what I was expecting, but I was expecting more than just radio silence, and for almost everybody to just not care. Now, I think part of the reason for this is because by the time I got it published, he was basically heading into retirement. So like he did, I think since I published it, I think he's maybe done 2 like public appearances, but he's pretty much done. One of the funny things I just it reminded me of this, because I watched hundreds of hours of Josh McDowell appearances. And one of the funny things about him is his early material. Now, and I'm not talking about like the stuff from the 70s, but starting in the 80s, he's got like the jean jacket or a leather jacket, because he's got to be cool like one of the kids. But then getting into the 90s, he starts to wear some of the craziest shit like you've ever seen. He's like this 60-year-old man with like this giant chain, or and like a basketball jersey, and I'm like, what are you doing, my guy?
Like the Mr. T of apologetics or something.
Yes.
Yeah, he always, along with just general, I don't know, smarminess or sleaze or something like that, he put on way too much like, hey, fellow kids energy.
How do
it was
you do?
So weird.
Yes, it was the original. When they
I
made
had the opposite experience you did, where when I made my that one video about Wallace, I perfectly expected it to, maybe not even be noticed, but just to be ignored.
Yeah.
And that's the only smart move to make in these situations. Like that video for my channel at that time was fairly small in views. It got like 40,000 or something like that. That did not need to appear on anybody's radar outside my immediate viewership in our community. Nobody had to know about that if he would just have kept his mouth shut and pretended it didn't exist. But all of a sudden I get this message from one of my friends saying, Wallace did a podcast with Greg, I think it was Greg Kokel, somebody talking about your thing.
Wasn't it the Cameron Bertuzzi thing?
No. This was before then.
Oh, okay.
This was like almost immediately after my first video.
Oh, wow.
I get this message saying, he's doing a podcast. I'm like, what? Number one, I was surprised he noticed. But number two, why is he going to amplify this? Just pretend it doesn't exist. Your excuses sound stupid for one thing.
Yes.
But you don't need to bring this up and nobody will know about it. It was the weirdest thing. But
wow.
I guess he can do him, I guess. Whatever.
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. For a detective, you'd think he'd understand some of these things too, right? Like,
yes, especially a detective whose primary thrust in his career, as far as I can tell, was media relations.
Right.
The main thing he did was presentations for juries and then going on Dateline and representing the department there. This is the most amateur hour move. I don't know. If I know not to do that, I cannot understand why he didn't, unless he's just so arrogant he can't help himself. I don't know. Anyway, we took a while on that. You want to start watching this video?
Yeah, let's watch.
All right, this one's titled, I solved murders for a living. Then I investigated
who was murdered.
All right, let's see how much we can get through without laughing here.
Me to talk about making a case for Christianity. I kind of thought, well, I don't even know why they would come to me as a detective. I can see why I can make a case, but
what's right? That? No, I was just like, why are they? Who's coming to you?
Yeah,
to make a case for Christianity as a detective. But that's just like from the very start, right? Like ever since this guy appeared on the radar, for anyone who knows the first thing about the New Testament or about the actual history of the emergence of Christianity, everyone's thinking the same thing. They're going, what?
Yeah.
Like, okay, you understand that this is not the same thing, right? It's not the same thing. How do you not understand that? And I think deep down, I don't know. And I go back and forth on this. Sometimes I think he must understand this, which then prompts me to look at Wallace's work as just a very a really well crafted grift.
Oh yeah.
He found a hook and sold a publisher on an idea, and it worked. God damn, it worked. And he's been cashing those checks ever since. But you just have to think, either on some level, he understands that, like, just at the outset.
Yeah. I never want to declare that anybody's a grifter or a liar or insincere. Number one, I don't want to expose myself to that kind of liability if I'm on someone's radar. But number two, I legitimately don't want to make that assumption about people, because I think there is a lot of leeway for somebody living in the faith who gets a lot of congratulations for their arguments for God to start sniffing their own farts. And, you know, he strikes me, some of the stuff he says strikes me as being a true believer, but
Yeah.
I don't think there is any way that he, as an intelligent grown-ass adult, can think that these skills actually apply to reading English text to determine things that were originally written in another language, in a culture and whole, even social language he's never even going to have a clue about. I cannot comprehend how he thinks that's a real serious thing other than just a carnival act. And he meticulously just he also has to see that he's not using this methodology. He's telling stories about detective work as a segue into something about apologetics. And I can't actually get into his head and judge his actual level of sincerity, but I can't see how he means this.
Have you read any of his books? I haven't, actually.
Not an entire one. It gets so tedious because it's just the same thing expanded into book form. I've listened to a lot of an audio version of Cold Case Christianity, and it's just the same thing he does here, but way too long. And it's, yeah. He tells stories about his police career,
right,
as if they were like episodes of a really badly written, police procedural. I got out of the car and I'm thinking, man, I'm way too old for this. And I was like, dude, come on.
Oh God. But it's kind of the, like, he's following, it is the Lee Strobel outline, right?
Yeah.
Basically, where individual chapters begin with a hook from an actual case that he worked as a police detective, much like what Strobel did, right? In the also called The Case for Christ, right? He started with a case that a lead that he was tracking as a reporter, or an article that he was writing, or someone he was investigating, as a hook into. And I mean, it was maybe the big difference is that Strobel's legitimately a gifted writer. Maybe that's what it is, but like it really is, like, it's effective. It works there. But I guess, if you've got someone who doesn't possess those sorts of journalistic writing abilities to begin with, maybe it's not as effective.
I won't lie. Wallace is a good writer and speaker in a functional way. Like, he's boring to read. I think it's just because it's so formulaic and you see the same things in short form presentations. And so seeing it dragged out is boring. But he knows media stuff. He knows how to present himself in writing and in person. But I think you're right. I never put that together, that how much Strobel was within his wheelhouse when he's writing a book. Like, I think he has definitely more of a knack for literary flair and stuff. Were you laughing at something in the chat?
I was laughing at what Nitty said. Is it that one? Yeah.
Trying not to die laughing. Don't want Wallace investigating me. Are you able to bring up?
He'll get it wrong. He'll fuck it up, right, Nitty? Yeah. What? Am I able to what?
Are you able to bring up chats from where you're at?
No. Nope.
Okay, I didn't know if you were.
I think I have to be. I actually have to be like a channel member or something like that.
Yeah. So if you see anything, just let me know and I can throw it up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also got a super chat. ONB Magnichondria are the powerhouse of the soul. First time JWW has been accused of being too long. Okay. But yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. I mean, it's so blindingly obvious. It's got to be a truism of the apologetics community. He saw what Lee Strobel did and said, "Hey, I can do that too, having been a detective." That is just, it's so by the numbers, repeat of the formula. Except Wallace thought, I'll do this with a personal history that's on the public record. That can't blow up in my face.
Yes. Right.
But yeah, it's so I want to with all that in mind, I want to actually we watched like 9 seconds. I want to rewatch this first little segment because I love the way he explains himself. No, you're fine. I love the way he explains himself at this, but I want to see through what he says here real quick.
When people first started asking me to talk about making a case for Christianity, I kind of thought, well, I don't even know why they would come to me as a detective. I can see why I can make a case, but what is the similarity between the cases I work and the scripture, for example, the Bible? Here's my casebook and here's my Bible. What's the similarity?
It's a very, very good question. What is the similarity between the New Testament and his case binder there? I mean, they're both bound. There's paper in there, and I assume writing, unless that's just maybe that's just like a giant binder that he ripped off of the table from Trump's display when he first became president, and it's full of blank pages. Could be, but I mean, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that's an actual case file with actual shit in it. So I mean, I guess those are similarities. We can give him that, right?
There's a lot of people in the chat saying basically nothing. I like Neely's answer.
Come on,
both are translated from the original Greek. That was great. But what I love about this is not just that he introduces this and poses this question but just how coy he is. Like, I was just sitting here innocently minding my own business with no intention of making a career out of this, where other people came up and said, hey,
you should
why
do
don't
this.
you use your and he's like, that's weird. I never thought of that.
No.
I don't know that this is a response. This is part of his new humility wave that he's suddenly diving into in response to everything being exposed. I kind of like to think, but it's just still so funny how
did he shave the goatee as part of his mea culpa here? Is return to humility.
The goatee was a very temporary thing anyway, so I don't know. He might have just
realized, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. Maybe he's trying to blame it on alternate universe evil Day Warner Wallace. All right, let's go.
It turns out if you think about it, there are some similarities between cold cases and working the case for Christianity. My cold cases are pretty rough. They're old, and most of my witnesses are no longer alive. My witnesses died years ago.
Sorry, what's that?
The case for Christianity. So he doesn't, I mean, he hasn't really provided any sort of presentation of what that even is at this point. We're just assuming that, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's a recognition here that there's problems. And I suppose there's problems only based on, where you stand, even within Christianity. Where you stand with regards to questions about the historical Jesus, the historical veracity of the New Testament, and the nature of this connection between what actually happened in the first century and the historic faith that developed around the events that happened. Of course, there's many, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that there are many Christian traditions over the course of over 1,000, 2,000 years now, who have come to grips with these things in different ways, Not exactly the same. There aren't Christians all over the world who are, losing their minds about whether there was one or two angels at the empty tomb and whether, they were sitting on the stone or not. They understand what these texts are and have probably a little bit more sophisticated perspective on how their faith intersects with reality. But I mean, yeah, Wallace is not that guy, and he's not speaking to those people at all.
This is for his audience, and what he's doing. I think you said he's acknowledging there's a problem or an issue here. I think he knows whether this was stuff exposed by him or not. That isn't even necessary. He knows these questions are swimming in the air. Like, why in the world is a cold case detective talking about this? Because this question's been asked by a lot of people, and so it almost feels like a little bit of damage control. He's trying to integrate it into a conversation about how you apply your faith, your detective skills of the Bible. But really, what I see this as is largely a lot of this video is an act of damage control, like just basically trying to tie this together.
Here's
what
some
we're
of
in right now
his excellent multimedia presentation skills on display, though. Wonder if he still does his own.
I wouldn't be surprised. That was a big thing he did.
His big thing. Yeah.
They
always look really sharp, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in a hurry to pay him compliments when I don't have to, but he legitimately is good. I mean, it's good artwork, it's good graphic design, it's well presented. There's nothing wrong with that. But right here, what he's doing, obviously, he's kind of just started it, but he's systematically explaining things about how cold cases work in a way that's meant to tie all the details back to how you approach the Bible. Well, my witnesses aren't there. I mean, wait, even the people who reported it are dead. So
they're dead. Everyone's dead. All I have is paperwork. That's it, right? I'm building a case out of paperwork.
You can tell he started with the Bible and all the challenges of dealing with the Bible, and is weaving his description of detective work around that.
Yep.
And they were interviewed by a detective, perhaps. And guess what? Sometimes that detective has passed away in the years since as well. So now I don't have the original witness available to me. And even the person who wrote the supplemental report about what that witness said, that guy's not even available to me. What does that sound like to you? It kind of sounds like the Gospels, doesn't it? I can't even make that case.
No way.
I mean, in a very roundabout way, I guess it sort of sounds like the Gospels, or in a very a very unsophisticated kind of like I'm just opening the New Testament for the first time and reading it in English sort of way, or without this is a collection of documents that are thousands of years old and have been stitched together from hundreds of manuscript copies over the course of thousands of years. I mean, not that way, because as soon as you start going there, then you have to ask different questions, which are questions that like he just doesn't ever want to get into, really.
You know what this reminds me of? Do you ever remember those Abraham Lincoln and JFK assassination lists they would make up?
No.
Oh, really? Like,
no, I don't know what this is, but I'm a Canadian, so that might not mean anything.
Oh, they would make these lists of similarities between the JFK and Abraham Lincoln assassinations.
Right. Okay.
So that it's so creepy how similar they are.
Yes.
And
okay.
That's just like this. And that if you sift through enough data and try to find the right semantics, you can make something that sounds like a connection. And I feel like that's all he's doing here. Like you could do this with so many different things. It's all just about phrasing. That's all it is.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, there's a big difference between something that happened, 30 years and a lot of the people surrounding it are dead, and something that happened 2,000 years ago in a completely different culture and language.
And there haven't been detectives for thousands of years writing reports
Yeah.
on the mysteries of the New Testament, and collecting them in their binders for him to finally get to and to sort out.
Yeah. I just love how he makes the connection as if he didn't see the thing that he's been telegraphing for the last 35 seconds as hard as he possibly can. But
Yeah.
oh well.
Is on the basis of like forensic evidence. That's why they went cold when they did. There wasn't really any good evidence to make the case with. I don't have cases that I've solved with DNA or with fingerprint evidence or, with other forms of forensic evidence. Those aren't the nature of my cold cases. I make my cases on the basis of cumulative circumstantial cases, cumulative circumstantial collections of evidence. What I mean is indirect evidence, not direct eyewitness testimony, indirect pieces of evidence that point to the same reasonable inference. Now, think about this for a second. That's the nature of my cold cases. But that's really very similar to the nature of the case for Christianity. You're not going to have access to your eyewitnesses. You're not even going to have access to the people who wrote those reports. And you don't have forensic evidence you can test, DNA, fingerprints, those kinds of things.
It's the one thing that I'm honestly, it's everyone in the chat knows this and understands this. You understand this. He might as well have a copy of like Harry Potter in front of him there with his giant binder, or the Lord of the Rings, because oh my God, it just, if you take the time to, and he spends like most of his time, as near as I can tell, just fixated on the Gospels. So let's talk about the Gospels, because that's where all this supposed eyewitness testimony is. These are not, they're not forensic reports. They're not. Scholars have classified them as bios or biographies, which I think is a poorly understood term in the modern world, because even though you're trying, even though the ancient Greek writers were trying to write true histories of the people that they featured in their bioi, their biographies, this was still crafted literature that looked as much like fiction as it did like history. And when you read the individual Gospels carefully, and you sit back and you think about what you're reading for a minute and go, what if the writer is stringing together this narrative to make theological points? What if they're doing that? You start to understand these texts quite differently. I would say much better, much more clearly, because that's much closer to what they were doing in antiquity, because that was of utmost importance. What made a great life was one that meant something. So they invented meaning for people as they wrote about them. That's just the way they did these things. And the best writers were able to do this in subtle, clever ways that required the reader to sit through and really think about what they were reading. Maybe read it many times before you actually get everything that's going on in the story.
Yeah. Kipp, you may be no cold case detective.
And I've written no books.
That's what YT said. Yeah, but you're not a cold case detective, Kipp. It's misinterpretations brought up an interesting question. Anybody know how many cold cases he solved? And I think when you listen to what he says here, he says a lot about the types of cases he solved and what kind of evidence he didn't have. The type of cases he was involved in, when, of course, he started being involved in them, because the whole investigation into his background got him cornered to the point where he admitted his cold case experience before becoming a Christian amounted to, I think, pulling off a case his dad was involved in, thumbing through it and realizing, okay, they got the right guy or the whatever, and moving on. But all that aside, what this really lets him obscure is what kind of police work he did and didn't do, so that he can shape the narrative of it more closely to the gospel. Like, there's one of the cases that was on Dateline NBC where he found a piece of physical evidence that, like, something that had been used for a garrote or something like that. In another case, something on someone's shoe. So this whole no forensic evidence thing, it might apply to some of his cases, but how many, to what extent, and how deeply was he involved in those specific cases versus other officers? A lot of that's obscured. And so he's making, just like he described police work very obviously in terms of the Gospels, he's doing the same thing here. He's cutting out all the things that wouldn't apply to the Gospels to make it sound like the same methodology applies across the board, even though it's laughable on its face.
Yeah.
By the way, I meant to say this earlier on. I feel bad that I haven't. People are mentioning things about Dan in the chat. Dan's on a trip right now. That's why he's just out for the week. I forgot to say that at the beginning. I'm bad at remembering stuff like that. But no, he hasn't been canceled. We're not fighting. He hasn't quit. He's just taking a week off because he had a trip planned. I guess let's continue with this thing.
His wife says he's the world's greatest detective. so does his mom. His mom too.
Jeez. Yeah. I guess one other thing I wanted to say is, to your point just about the Gospels, it should not be difficult or sophisticated to tell that the goal of those is to make a theological point or a supernatural point. Like, if you read those and think, yeah, these people were just trying to record some bits of history, it's so just obviously fundamentally not the point of the text. And then I think even a lot of Christians would admit that, until you get into a corner of apologetics that's meant to try to build a case based on these being like biographies or historical accounts. There's no motivation, or I think even inclination, to think of these texts that way.
No, none.
All right, let's see if we can make some headway through this thing, huh?
All right.
You have to build the case on the basis of a large body of evidence, indirect evidence, because it's not eyewitnesses. And you're just trying to assemble what is the most reasonable inference from all of this evidence. So it turns out the process that we use as cold case detectives could actually be applied to studying the scripture. So what I want to do is take a few steps with you to help you understand some of the.
Yeah, what he's doing here, he loves these phrases. I don't know, you haven't responded to him before, but I don't know how much of him you've seen. He loves dealing with these phrases, direct evidence and indirect evidence, right?
Yeah.
He harps on the fact that people say circumstantial evidence like it's a bad thing, but really that's the best evidence. And his leaning on indirect evidence and talking about how it makes a cumulative case. Number one, I think he's basically setting the stage for half-assed or just poor evidence for things being a good reason to build a case on something, or just reading between the lines. But then all this cumulative thing, that's like cumulative cases for Christ. Well, no single one of these evidences is good, but you pile it all together.
And you've got a whole bunch of shitty pieces of evidence, which just makes a giant pile of shit. But no. Maybe before he continues, just so we're clear, when it comes to investigating the actual historical Jesus, because that's sort of what we're talking about here, is what actually happened. Scholars, the state of scholarship today is sort of in this place where New Testament scholars have kind of given up on talking about the historical Jesus, out of recognition of the fact that we just can't get there. It really looks like there was probably a guy who was killed by the Romans and had a following, and this movement emerged out of that. But honestly, that's what we've got.
Yeah.
So direct evidence, no. Indirect evidence, I guess you've got indirect evidence for like these sorts of things. Like a guy existed and he died by way of execution, and a number of people thought that he rose from the dead, and like that's it. That's literally all that New Testament scholars, critical New Testament scholars nowadays are kind of willing to go, yeah, that sounds about right. Everything after that, no, it's blood on the carpet.
All right, so let's look at, I guess we'll see some of his practices then, considering that's how you approach this.
I'm eager to explore.
I don't
see
know,
what I've been doing wrong all this time.
Yeah, I might
learn
everybody
something.
has something to learn.
Yeah. Okay.
He has kind of shat on actual scholarship even among Christians because he has a different approach that just works a little better. How many murders have you solved, Kipp? But a lot of what he's saying basically sounds like, well, I've thrown people into prison for basically shit evidence. So, I mean, if that was okay, then you can believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go.
Important practices, investigative practices of detectives that we use to make the case for any criminal case, and show you how these same practices can be used to make the case, to investigate the case for Christianity. Now, one of the first practices you're going to have to wrap your hands around is simply this. You have to take the time to read your case book anytime you open a new case. And that's why I brought for you this particular case book. This is a case book from an old murder. It's about 30 years old. And this is what we start with. This thing would typically be on a shelf, unsolved. And I have a first duty here, which is to open this case book and go through every single page of this case. And there's just report after report.
He says, I have this responsibility to go through every single page, and skips the first 70 pages. Well done, detective.
We do have a super chat I want to get out there. Apologetics Review. Thank you for the generous $10 super chat. Question for Kipp. Is the lack of any mention of Jesus in writings of Philo of Alexandria a powerful anti-apologetic? Is this circumstantial evidence against the gospel accounts?
Philo of Alexandria would have been relatively contemporary to the existence, like to the time of Jesus. And while he didn't live in Judea, he certainly spent time in Palestine, which it was the Roman province. Well, no, it's still Roman province of Judea at that time. But so I would say it's useful in terms of countering the idea that the gospel story of Jesus is just like it's just like 4 different newspaper accounts of the same things happening. I would say it's good in countering that, but I don't know. It depends on what exactly you're looking for, or what exactly you're thinking as an anti-apologetic. I would say it's unsurprising to me if Philo never heard of Jesus, just because scholarly interpretations of the historical Jesus continue to maintain that he really was a relative nobody in his own lifetime, who became famous posthumously after his death and his resurrection. So of course there's lots of people who have problems even with that, but even from that perspective, it's not somebody that I think Philo would have been would have any reason to have been familiar with in the first place. So I think we can consider a lot of the things in the life of the actual historical Jesus to be particularly mundane, including his death. to the point that it shouldn't be any surprise that very, very few people noticed. And the only reason anybody noticed eventually has to do with historical developments around this movement of Christianity, things that happened out of its own control. Just in the general, I mean, the first and the second Jewish war had an enormous impact on this that actually had nothing at all to do with Christianity, but were like major components in elevating Christianity to a place within the Roman Empire it didn't enjoy at an earlier stage. So it's really just on the basis of a number of historical accidents that we are where we are today, which is just one of the fascinating things about history in the first place, that somebody like a relative unknown figure like that can become the catalyst of a world movement without his knowledge or permission. So
yeah, I think assuming a historical Jesus, which I'm not necessarily a mythicist, but I think connecting the character of Jesus as seen in the Gospels to any person or people is pretty
fraught with
semantically tenuous
difficulty.
to begin
Yep.
with. Who knows whether that person even set something off or whether there were just a set of conditions that was going to trigger some movement similar to Christianity, and they happen to base themselves on the idea of a preacher or preachers. I don't know. I'm speaking to this with way less qualification, but I think the core point is, and I think this touches on what you're getting at, Jesus himself was very insignificant and basically nobody would have known or given a shit about him at the time. And
Nope.
I think this speaks to people who apologists say like, well, if these stories are true, then why didn't anybody speak up about it? Well, because nobody cared or knew. Like, it was nothing until later. So yeah, nobody at the time was talking about it.
Yep.
We have another super chat I like. If you haven't solved a murder, how can you call yourself a historian?
God damn it. I shouldn't have skipped the solving murder seminar when I was doing my PhD.
Yeah.
Shit.
And then YT says, what he really means is read his casebook after it's been translated several times over. And that's a core point I think is just dying to be made here.
Oh my God.
He's talking about read the casebook completely. What he means is at best, pick up an English translation of an ancient text and read it start to finish. And to act like that has anything to do, you're dying to say something about this, and I think you're better qualified to.
Yeah, and maybe after he gets into some of this a little bit, but I mean that's just such a glaring point. I can't imagine, like imagine the Mexican version of J. Warner Wallace sitting down and giving this exact presentation in Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and presuming I've no, maybe his Spanish is great, but let's pretend Jay Warner, or let's do a different one. His Norwegian counterpart, because I bet you anything Wallace knows not a lick of Norwegian, sitting down and making this entire exact same presentation and opening his Norwegian casebook. If he just handed that off to Wallace, like, what the fuck is he going to do with that? Right? Yeah. Like, that's what we're dealing with. You have an English translation of, and that's just, factoring into consideration too, that these are all things taking place within the modern world. These are ancient texts, which are fundamentally different than case files. Like,
yeah.
Like, they're not forensic statements. It's just,
what it sounds like is, if you want to really understand how a car runs, you have to look at all the seats and the dash from side to side without ever peeking under the hood. Like, I don't know, that's a very rough analogy, but that's basically what he's doing. He's looking at a final product that's not only been translated into a modern version of English, but also he's not looking at any of the moving parts of where these texts came from, what the original expressions meant.
No.
And this will become more egregious as we hear him explain this, but there's a whole history of how these things got compiled and where they came from. And he thinks that reading an English version of the final product is the same as reading a case file. Like, okay, dude.
Sorry. O and B Magnochondria are the powerhouse of the soul. Josephus, first century Jewish cold case detective.
It might be, maybe another analogy would be like me watching a Dateline NBC episode and then thinking I've read his entire case file, and now I can speak. I can speak to who is the murderer as well as he could.
It's like that.
Okay.
It's totally like that.
You shortcut it. Okay, this is kind of similar to that. No, can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Have to actually go through it piece by piece, word by word. Because if you don't do that, you will sometimes get an idea that seems powerful, but you're taking it out of context. You're not actually even getting it in the proper context because you didn't take the time to read this thing from cover to cover. You've got to read it from cover to cover to keep it in proper context.
So as somebody who has some qualifications,
that's the thing.
How just absolutely galling is that level of, now you really got to do your diligence and read this.
Does he also like, does he have no fucking clue about what the New Testament is?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, sure, it's a book, right? But this is a carefully curated book over the course of several centuries. And it looks different based on, you know, whichever community you happen to be part of. You know, it's like the reason why several of the New Testament texts look like they might be in conversation or connect to one another is because the people who put it together, that's what they wanted, right? That's what they wanted. So we're going to keep that kind of stuff in. Some of the other stuff that sounds weird, we should leave that out. So no, that's not like, I don't know. I'd be much more comfortable with him saying, yeah, I sat down with the entire corpus of early Christian literature and sorted through it in order to arrive at some of my conclusions, but he's not doing that. Sure not.
That's even assuming that no historical factors, including arguments over heresy and destroying texts and stuff like that, contributed to what we have as the body of Christian text today. Like, there's so much there that he's skipping right over.
It's such a positivistic view, and that's like, you can't. I mean, it's embarrassing as someone who is not properly a historian, who does certainly enough historical work to know what I'm talking about. You can't be positivistic in your methods as an historian. You just can't, because you end up with a very one-sided, inaccurate, jaded, not jaded necessarily, but just it's a polished perspective of things that happen. Don't really help you to arrive at the facts of what happened, right? And my God, shouldn't we expect more from the people who are solving our murders? Like, it's embarrassing. This is embarrassing history. It's even, God, it strikes me as even more embarrassing investigative work from a supposed detective. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And even, I don't know.
I did a I did an episode of Zadanza. It was quite a while ago now, with somebody who had, I don't know if you'd seen it, with somebody who had actually been a police detective in California, in very, very close to the same area Wallace had
I
been.
did see that one. Yep.
And the number of things that I was able to ask him about in terms of the way Wallace described, not only is he describing police work in, I don't know, he's describing it so much in a way that's meant to fit investigating the New Testament from an apologetic perspective, that he just totally warps it. Like when he says, it takes time for the murderous intent to build. Like, no, it doesn't. Sometimes people just go and kill someone. That doesn't make any sense at all. It just, I don't know. He's so off the, but yeah, the way he talks about police work is an embarrassment. Like I wonder what people who really know him or worked with him professionally really think he's doing for his legacy and stuff like that. Like he's selling out a lot of parts of himself, I think.
He really is.
Whatever legacy he had as a police
officer. He really
officer.
is. And I
Same
mean,
thing happens though in scripture, right?
No, I was just going to say, I won't say anything overt, but if you do ever get anyone in the chat, if you do ever get the chance to talk to somebody who worked in the LAPD, you know, in the 90s and the 2000s, make sure you do ask about him, because I have, and I will say that people that I know who have, you know, worked in the LAPD at around the same time that Wallace did, and who still have contacts with people who worked in the LAPD at the time that Wallace did, certainly do have opinions about this guy. So I'm just saying that.
Yeah, he has all the energy of somebody whose primary thing was self-hype and getting on TV. I don't know that about him, but he exudes that energy so thoroughly.
He sure does.
There are in anything. It's not just him. In any field, in anything, there's a certain type of personality that is going to be the one that ends up getting on shows like Dateline, and it's not usually going to be the most talented, rigorous people. It's going to be people.
It's so funny how that works, right?
Yeah.
If I was to read a simple passage and take it out, I can find a way to twist that for our own purposes.
Oh, I love.
I've given an example in Forensic Faith, the book, from Psalm 56. And it's an example that I can see a young woman taking and actually applying to herself, when in fact, in its context, it's not been written for young women to apply to themselves. In Psalm 56, you'll find a passage in
that's
which,
kind of awesome.
It is written,
that's a life verse.
Me, O God, for men hotly pursue me. Could you imagine if I was to take that, or a young woman was to take that out of context and apply that to herself as her life verse? I don't think that would probably be appropriate, given that the entire context of verse of Psalm 56 is actually intended to be read as a statement from David. Look at how David actually uses this in its proper context. He says, "Be merciful to me, O God, for men hotly pursue me all day long. They press their attack. My slanderers pursue me all day long. Many are attacking me with the
David,
when I'm afraid, I will trust in you."
Sorry, what's that now?
No, I was going to say, I don't know. When David says, "Be merciful to me, O God, for men hotly pursue me," it maybe, I don't know, the nuance could be the same. Yeah, but yeah,
this is like a corny church joke that he really just didn't pull off. He didn't transition to it well. He forced it in way too bad, and it's just, no, it's fine. It's fine for a corny joke, I guess, but it's also what he's doing. Again, this really irritates me, and I'm sure it does to you too, as somebody who has any actual knowledge in this. This is such an egregious example, obviously, that I don't know. It's just stupid. Nobody's going to read the text and think that one sentence means that instead. Like that's just so blindingly obvious. And also, he's basically glazing himself up so hard for reading complete paragraphs of English texts, which has nothing to do with the actual investigation he's supposed to be doing.
But you know what the great irony here is, Zod, is that the Jewish readers of the Old Testament did in fact actually often read the texts this way. where they would take a phrase, a snippet, a clause, and just rip it completely out of context in order to supply it new meaning. You see this in the New Testament all the time. So-called fulfilled prophecies all the way throughout the New Testament are just this. That's what they are. But it wasn't just New Testament writers who were doing this either, right? Like, this is what you see when you read the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is what you see when you read Philo. This is what you see when you read just about any early Jewish literature. So I do always get a little bit of a chuckle when the evangelicals start wagging their fingers about taking text out of context. Yeah.
And it's obvious. But
You could build a religion on that, dude.
Yeah. This is communication between him and his audience. And so what he's trying to do is he's trying to set such a low bar for intellectual rigor in using the scriptures to determine things, not only to understand what they mean, but to determine things about the past from them. But then also, I think this is meant to inform how they understand atheists or critics of any kind,
right? Yes,
who point out anything about the Bible. Well, they just didn't read it's just setting that.
This is reading the whole story.
Yeah, it's just setting them up with that automatic defense inside their heads. So when someone points out that the empty tomb stories are completely, well, they just didn't understand the context. They're like that lady who thinks that the Bible says men will hotly pursue them. Ha ha ha.
You get a sense that in its context, that's a very different verse and probably should not be excerpted and used by young women to make a case for their own being pursued by young men. So I think this is why it's so important
by J. Warner Wallace,
to read everything cover to cover. And if we're in a book or a verse set, we have to read it in the entire context and not excerpt one verse by itself. The next thing we have to do is, as we're reading this book, we have to keep in mind the broad principles of evidence, right? I mean, we have to kind of understand how we work evidence, and I've discussed some of this in the book, Forensic Faith. But what I want to talk about here is one of the most important broad principles, and I hear this as an objection all the time. And that is, Jim, you're proposing that there is an extraordinary claim you're making here, that there is a God. Or that Christianity is true, or that a man could rise from the dead after being crucified.
I'm already mad.
That's an extraordinary claim. If you want me to believe an extraordinary claim, you're going to have some extraordinary evidence. Okay, that seems on its face rhetorically powerful, doesn't it? And it almost seems reasonable that if I've got an extraordinary claim, I have to have extraordinary evidence to back it up. But I can tell you, I've worked cases, this was one, in which the crime was so rare that I couldn't even find another similar crime in my state, in the history of the state. So for all the citizens who live in my state, very few commit murders. So they're rare to begin with. But of all the murders that have ever been occurred, I could not find a single one that was like this one. I had an extraordinary set of claims. Did I need extraordinary evidence in order to make the case? No. As a matter of fact, my evidence was really quite pedestrian. The same kind of evidence I use in every other case.
It's very convenient for him to leave out what exactly was extraordinary about this case. But I don't know. I'm willing to bet that all the elements of that case probably were plausible within everything that we know about the physical world. I'm guessing, right? So at that point, okay, like, how did these guys continue to misunderstand the power of this point? Because I hear this too on a regular basis, about how, as someone who is very interested when it comes to the Bible in what the original authors were writing, why they were writing it, can we connect this in any ways to things that actually happened to history, and how? Like, those are questions that I'm always asking, right? So when I'm, looking at things, and my bread and butter is the Old Testament. So when I'm looking at things in the Old Testament, I just recently did some stuff about King Josiah. And there's an interesting feature in the text where the death of King Josiah is just kind of thrown out as it's almost an afterthought. It feels like the writer is at pains to talk about it. And I think there's good reason for that, because Josiah is supposed to be the great hero of what we call the Deuteronomistic history. He's kind of the guy. And I think his death was unexpected. And then when you investigate, when you actually think about what happens, is he goes to fight in this battle at Megiddo against Necho, the pharaoh in Egypt. Not sure if he's actually fighting alongside the Babylonians or if he just went out on his own to do this before the Babylonians showed up. But he gets killed. And historians talk about this kind of stuff, right? They like, what was he doing? It wasn't a good idea to do this. What did he think he was doing? Did he really buy into his own hype and think that he was bulletproof and God was going to just save him to do this? So, like, as an historian, when I look at something like that, or I don't know, a better example is probably something like the wars that Israel fought with Moab during the reign of Ahab in the northern kingdom. This is the 9th century. We have a story in the Bible which basically tells us that for a time the Israelites were unsuccessful because the god of the Moabites, Chemosh, became emboldened through this offering of a child sacrifice to defeat them. Historians are going to look at that and go, I think there's probably a different explanation for what happened. I'm not necessarily going to jump on board and say, yeah, it was Chemosh, guys. It's the sacrifice, and that's what did it, right? That's what the writer thinks. But when you're doing historical research, I'm looking for plausible explanations that fit within my understanding of how the world works, how, things happen naturalistically. It doesn't mean I'm, diametrically opposed to anything supernatural. What it means is that's not the first explanation. And I never get there because there's always like 15 perfectly mundane, natural explanations for what happened before you get to God did it.
Yeah.
That's it, right? That's all of it. And he's going to treat his case the same way. There are a bunch of plausible explanations for his extraordinary evidence before he gets to the point of must have been killed by a demon.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. He's not doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He's very careful not to say what was unique about the thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't believe for a second that book actually has the case he's talking about. I think it's a petty thing to lie about, but I think he would just let that flow right off his lips just to make it, sound more impressive or whatever. But yeah,
it's probably the ministry budget for the last 4 years, right? It's like,
what makes me so mad about this is just how completely brazen it is. Like, they know, especially if this were applied to any other supernatural event or any other paranormal event that somebody brought to their attention, they know very damn well why that extraordinary claim would require extraordinary evidence and what both those terms mean together. That a claim that is supernatural or paranormal or just totally defies anything you've seen before, if somebody told you that, you would have trouble believing it unless they gave you really good reason to. Right? They know absolutely fucking well that's what that saying means and that's true. And for them just to like, well, extraordinary, it's extraordinary because somebody hadn't, you know, nobody else had choked someone with a coat hanger before in this state. So, but I didn't need extraordinary. Well, no, it's not like the guy shot lasers out of his eyes. You would probably need more pedestrian evidence for that. But the fact that he used a slightly different weapon than they usually used, or whatever it was, that's not what they mean. And you know it. I'm sorry. He knows that that's not what they're talking about. And that drives me crazy. Because that is, even if he's
100%.
any kind of true believer, that is an utterly insincere argument. And that pisses me off.
Yes.
Sorry.
Be pissed. You're entitled, goddammit.
That's one of those ones where there's no room for interpreting sincerity there. And there's no room for even like manipulating yourself into that argument. You are trying to trick people by the time you make that argument. I'm sorry.
Yep.
And I was able to convict a man of an extraordinary crime, an extraordinary claim with really very ordinary evidence. You don't need extraordinary evidence to prove something extraordinary.
By the way, I don't want to stop a long time here, but I just love how freely he's like, yeah, and what I used to convince that guy, that was pedestrian evidence. That was just ordinary. If he was the DA, would he close with that? So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would like you to consider the pedestrian ordinary evidence I tossed your way. See if that's enough.
I have this cumulative case of pedestrian evidence. I'm presenting to you. I have 614 pieces of very pedestrian facts that I would like to present to you.
Jesus.
It's so
you have to simply understand the role of evidence and the kinds of evidence that we do use when we make a claim. So I just want to help you at least overcome that first objection. You might think, wow, I'm not even sure what kind of extraordinary evidence I could use. It turns out it'll be rather ordinary evidence. The same kind of evidence we use in criminal cases, we will use right here.
Same kind.
And how are we going to learn that evidence? How are we going to discover that evidence? We're going to do that by employing investigative practice number 3. I want you to become really good note takers, really good.
Okay.
Could you imagine him teaching this at the police academy?
In general. I brought the Bible that I purchased when I first became a believer. I was not willing to invest much in this investigation at first. I didn't think Christianity was true. And
it actually looks, when I saw it at first,
simply
I was like, when I saw it at first, it actually, hold on, I'll get it.
Okay.
It actually looks a lot like my Greek New Testament.
Holy cow!
It? And it
you stole his book. I can tell. Sorry.
This isn't the good one, by the way. This is what do they call it? The United Bible Society 4th Revised Edition, which isn't the my Nestle Island is actually on the shelf there, and it's blue. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, that sure does look an awful lot like a Greek New Testament. But it's not. And mine, I got this, as you can see, it's also pretty well used and worn out. I got this when I passed my very first year of New Testament Greek. They the United Bible Society just gave them out to everyone, so that was fun. But yeah,
I love there is a thing in the chat that I always thought was a funny point in this. Wait, I'm confused. You have to buy Bibles. Like there's so many things about this story that just don't add up.
Right? Yeah.
Like there wouldn't be people throwing.
Where would I find a Bible?
Yeah, but also he always tells in this story about how he bought a pew Bible. I heard this pastor talk about Jesus, and so I went and bought a pew Bible. I mean, his wife's been trying to get him to go to church. You think she doesn't have a Bible already?
Right.
Whatever. But
when he says that, do you think he's just covering for the fact that he just grabbed a Bible out of the pew and took it home with him?
I don't think so, but I think what I think he's trying to maybe sound a little folksy, or
probably.
But considering that it's already pretty egregious that he's trying to treat reading an English translation of the Bible as an act of, investigative scholarship into these ancient events. Just the fact that he's like, yeah, I wanted to use my detective skills to dig into this case about this 2,000-year-old man. So I went to the store and bought the cheapest English Bible I could possibly find with no textual notes or anything like that. And I read it cover to cover. It's like, okay, dude, cool.
Yeah. The arrogance. It's pretty off the charts.
It's like he almost, obviously this whole routine is an act of anti-intellectualism.
It totally is.
And he's making a populist argument to his audience. And so I get why he's doing that, even though it's shitty, but it's when you really tie together what he's saying, it just sounds so absurd.
Pitched Jesus as a really smart guy. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll buy a Bible to see how smart Jesus is.
I love that line too. He pitched Jesus as a really smart guy.
That's he's talked about that a lot. I've noticed that he thought Jesus was cool because he was smart. Because I'm smart. I'm a smart guy. So Jesus was smart. I can connect with Jesus.
He's telling on himself so hard. Like, how many times has he heard somebody probably referred to overtly or by implication as being smart, a historical figure, whatever? Like, how many of those times, like, holy shit, he said someone's smart? I'm going to go run and buy a biography about him. Like, that doesn't even add up. He's clearly just...
Zod, chat, how much do you want to bet that J. Warner Wallace has if he's not a member, he's at least applied to Mensa? 100%. This guy has applied to Mensa. I have no doubt at all.
And he used his Mensa skills
to prove the Gospels.
He probably sat in a room with his wife and his pastor and is like, okay, should we use the Mensa story or the detective story?
That's next. Now that the detective Griff has kind of run its course, the next book is going to be how Mensa member shows that Jesus rose from the dead. Yes.
It just, the whole story just defies plausibility. I'm not saying no non-believer can ever come to Christianity. It seems weird if you're like a serious informed atheist that you're going to hear something over the pulpit and change your mind. But let's just say that can happen. The way he describes it is just so bizarre. I don't know. It's like an alien trying to describe human behavior, except he's a Christian who he always talks about how he'd never met a Christian in his life. Bullshit, obviously. But it feels like the opposite. This feels like somebody who's never seen an atheist in his entire life trying to describe what one would act like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say what he's going to get into is somebody who's never seen or heard of this thing called biblical scholarship attempt to describe biblical scholarship.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
That's where we're going.
So I bought this one. I think I spent about $6 for this. This is a pew Bible. Very, very, it's the kind of thing you see under a church chair or a pew. And I started to go through it, but I already had a discipline in place.
It's like he's got a tab on every page of that
pretty good
Bible.
Analyst of the kinds of words we use. As a matter of fact, I had mastered something, not mastered, but I had become pretty good at something called forensic statement analysis.
Oh, forensic statement analysis. Yeah.
Oh, forensic.
I think so. The first time the first time I heard it broken down what this is, and in the first place, like I said, as far as I understand, it's bullshit, right? It's pseudoscience. The police departments don't use it, or at least most don't, and think you shouldn't.
I think some do, and I think that's because police methodology is not very highly standardized. And so what I understand is people go around and sell this, probably contractors, whoever, go around and sell this process. And because police activities or police work is so unregulated and so non-standardized, a department here or there or a few detectives will pick it up and start just using it and seeing how much of it they can sell in court. I don't know 100%, but that's my understanding. And I think that's what Sergeant Skeptic had said when he was here. I can't recall if I got any of that from him or if it's just
It kind of seems to me like it's Timu profiling almost. like instead of going through the extensive psychological training that the FBI profilers need to in order to do that kind of psychological work. It's like, oh, well, you can just read these witness statements and pay attention to these kinds of words that appear in witness statements, and that will lead you to at least to evaluate whether, as I understand it, probably evaluate whether the witness is telling the truth or not, which is ridiculous on several levels, right? I think just as a discipline, because most people write differently than they talk too. And a lot of people, they fucking suck at writing. I mean, it's as simple as that. When you encounter
so real quick, I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off.
No,
but I think what you're going to say and how we can expound on this will land a little harder after we hear him describe this.
Okay.
You want to give him a minute to
do that? Yeah.
Okay.
It's really more of an art than a science, but it's really a discipline of studying word choices.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Nope.
just to add something. But number one, I forgot to mention, I love he has developed this reflex to brag and then pull back on it. And I like to think that I helped do that. But ever since then, he's developed this entire weird language of humility and walking back. But then here he just said, I had mastered. Well, maybe not mastered, but he does that so automatically now. It's hilarious. But
well done, Zod. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
I mean, I don't really know. I probably have a way of, looking for that stuff now. There are some things that he clearly does, but I love all that little stuff now. You can tell he's on pins and needles whenever he starts telling his story, and he tries to be a little careful.
Yeah. No, you're entitled, man.
That suspects might make when writing down what they were doing on the day of a crime. Give me that piece of paper. I want to study your statement to see where it is you're lying to me, where it is you're leaving something out. And we do that by examining the words that are optional. Optional words.
Optional
Turns out
words.
that's the giveaway. The words you don't have to use, but you do optionally, those are what I'm looking at. So, for example, and I made a list of these in Forensic Faith, I'm looking at things like pronoun use. That's really important. I could call somebody by their first name.
Always about pronouns, isn't it, with these guys? It always comes back to that.
If I were unethical, I would love to just clip that sentence and make a short of it.
Yeah, right.
Pronouns, they are very important. Dash J. Warner Wallace.
I could say he did this.
No,
go ahead.
Let's let him cook for a minute, and then we'll
what
talk
kind
about
of pronoun
language.
I use to describe somebody tells me a lot about how I feel about that person. I applied that to Scripture. As a matter of fact, if you look at my first Bible, you will see that it is a colored mess of all kinds of notes on every, no matter where I open it,
he's probably done that, right? Like there are they'll teach Bible study methods in some places where you probably color code all the color code your subject pronouns and your object pronouns. I mean, it's just a way of teaching you how to follow basic rules of syntax, right? So good for you, I guess. But if anybody has studied or learned a second or a third or a fourth language, do you know a second language, Saad?
I'm learning Spanish. I'm very, very, very rudimentary. But
right.
I have some sense of how difficult it is and how if I tried to speak it, I would sound like foreigners trying to talk to us now.
So one of the things that you'll discover in any language is that when you're translating from one language to another, uh, you're not always going to be supplying the pronouns in the same places.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like this is one of these things. I wanted to pull up an example, but I didn't prepare enough in advance, and that's my fault, and I'm sorry, and I feel shame. But when you read the Greek New Testament, right? And you, provided you can actually read Greek, and you're translating it into English, there are several places in this text where I will have to provide pronouns because this is just how this works in English that's different than in Greek. There are lots of times, certainly with certain types of verbs and with participles, where it's just a single word that I will translate into English as a basic clause that includes a subject pronoun, and maybe even an object pronoun. So I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You're examining maybe this is a good way of telling whether or not the translator is a truthful eyewitness to the quality of his translation. I don't know, but this just makes no fucking sense when you understand that you're dealing with text, or if you understand the first thing about how foreign languages work. And I actually don't think Jim does. And the reason I say that is because I'm constantly reminded of this. It's a pretty famous session video encounter between him and Mike Lacona. I'm sure you've seen this, where they're on the stage of a panel together, and Mike Lacona is trying to tell Wallace that no, when you're actually reading the Greek text, the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke are actually copying verbatim, like word for word, from the Gospel of Mark. Big chunks. We could see it, right? It's right there, Jim. It's right there in the Greek text. And Jim's going, well, I just see it differently. And I'm like, he doesn't understand. I think he must not have a clue. He's still operating on that same level that we were all at in like the 5th grade, when we thought we were super clever and jumbled all the letters of the English alphabet and made our own language. I thought I was super duper clever because I knew enough at least to know that my language could only work if vowels replaced vowels. So, I at least did that. But he's literally operating on that level. It's that dumb.
I'm no scholar at all. I learned a little bit of Spanish when I was younger, and I've been trying to pick it up over the last most of a year. I couldn't make conversation. I could try to babble my way through instructions and stuff like in baby talk. But I know enough grammar to understand. Often in Spanish, you don't use a pronoun. It's implied by the form of the verb you're using. Oftentimes, you'll describe yourself doing an action by using the subjective, and the subjective goes in front of the verb instead of using, or not, sorry, objective. You use an objective pronoun to refer to yourself. It's a whole other scheme. And so if somebody were to write something out in Spanish and it were translated into English, all this stuff about, and these are two very, very similar language that they're growing in parallel to each other and have a ton of similarities. And even then, the word choices a Spanish person used to write something in Spanish and then have it translated in English would not apply at all. He could not infer anything from the word choice, or maybe some things, but very little. And he'd be more likely prone to error and jumping to wrong conclusions than anything. I can tell that just by having studied a little bit of basic Spanish, along with, I guess, my history is like an English teacher and stuff. But by the time you're dealing with like dead Middle Eastern languages or dialects or whatever. He's so off the rails. I'm sorry. It's stupid.
And at this point, you have to think, and this is the crazy thing to me too, right? We know, like, he's been like he graduated seminary.
Yeah,
I'm fairly sure, right? Didn't take any Greek to graduate seminary, which is a surprise, but like at this point, I have to think that he just understands enough of how much his grift doesn't work on the basis of the languages to know, well, there's no fucking way I can take Greek now. Just because it's like, you know, there's no way he can maintain. And that's the thing that blows my mind, right? Like he's friends with these people, like Mike Lakota, like Gary Habermas, like people who know this stuff. And I mean, if they, you know, can't sit down with their friend and tell him, Jim, come on, this is bullshit. Wow.
I think I don't know if they put it in those words. I think there has been some tension there. And that's where he just says, well, you know, I think he says the actual education of the stuff is overrated and that he has his methodology.
He said that. Yeah.
He's even gone so far as to start shitting on Christian apologists, I think, because they're basically just actually capable of what he claims to do.
Coming in from an outsider is way better. You know, I could see things you guys miss. Okay.
And just on a side note, that Bible looks okay. I've seen Bibles like that kids would mess with and basically highlight everything to make it look really well read. He might have done that following some system. I'm not going to say it's not a possibility, but it looks like something where he tabbed and highlighted literally everything just to make it look as studious as possible. Yeah. At some point, once you've highlighted everything, then nothing's highlighted anymore.
It's kind of right. Yeah. Like what is the...
But whatever.
If everyone's super, then no one is. Yeah.
You want to see if we can finish this off here?
Let's see.
The same. Because I was using forensic statement analysis to dive into the material in Scripture, looking to see how does Paul describe his fellow disciples, his fellow apostles? How does he describe them? It was important to me to see what kind of pronoun use he was going to use, because it would tell me something about how he really felt about them. Also, there are other optional words. Let me give you an example.
But honestly, like, hold on a minute. What does that mean? When he talks about the different pronouns, like, is he going to use, like, what? He used a masculine object pronoun to describe, you know, another disciple correctly? What else would he use? Like, I don't understand. What?
Well, like, maybe if he used the actual name versus a pronoun,
right? Oh, yes, I see. Using the pronoun is maybe a way of,
Or if he like said my brother James versus,
that versus him.
But to get a perspective on how utterly worthless this is, another way of putting it just occurred to me. You could not go back and read something by, say, George Washington or William Bradford or somebody like that, who is writing every word in comprehensible English. They're not even in Middle or Old English. They are in modern English.
Yep.
And you could barely understand what they're saying, much less sit there and try to do a forensic statement analysis, parsing out the nuance of what they meant. They're speaking a whole other idiom, everything implied by their choice of using pronouns or adjectives or whatever. To act like you can even understand the implications of what he's writing, even parsing out literally, is going to take some work. Because I had to teach high schoolers like colonial literature, and it is a nightmare just to get them to comprehend it. But to actually think that you can get inside their head based on the words they use in, 17th century idiom or whatever,
right?
It's nonsensical. So to think you can do that from like 2,000 years earlier based on a translation from a dead, it's sorry.
And this is still, let's remind people, this is still like several steps removed from whatever an eyewitness is. These are not eyewitness accounts. Paul was not an eyewitness to anything in the, well, maybe he was in the life of Jesus. We just don't know. But he certainly doesn't claim to be an eyewitness to anything in the life of Jesus. And he doesn't report anything as an eyewitness beyond his own mystical experiences that he had with the resurrected Jesus. That's the only thing that he claims to be an eyewitness to, and those are pretty sketchy, problematic things to ground here. So, like, and when it comes to the Gospels, these are anonymous texts written in Greek. Like, let's make sure to point that out too, right? Like, these were composed, and there's no doubt about this. Like, there is no ambiguity at all that these were texts composed in Greek, purporting to talk about things that took place within an Aramaic speaking world. So already you're so many layers removed. So it's like that. Because the Greek is not even a translation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is compositional. It is a compositional language relating events which at one point were reported in Aramaic and eventually translated into Greek, but not what we see in the New Testament. That happened quite a long time before that. And then there was probably a shit ton of things just invented in Greek about Jesus. Probably most of it was just invented in Greek about Jesus. So, I mean, you're not uncovering anything. It's just like, it's honestly just as dumb as in the old days when Google Translate was new and it was fun for everybody to have Google Translate translate the words of a song into another language, and then they punched that back in and had it retranslated into English, and then they made funny videos about that, right? Like, that's the level we're talking about here in terms of the value of this exercise. It's that valuable what he's doing.
So would it be a fair analogy to say, like, I heard stories of something that happened in Mexico to, like, bricklayers or something like that who lived in a rural village who weren't super educated? I wrote about it in sophisticated English using grammar that clearly came from a college educated person, and told the whole story that way in terms that person would never know to understand because it's a different language and also just a different education level.
Yeah.
And then it gets translated into Russian, and a Russian person picks that up and thinks that they're analyzing
and analyzes it next to his cold case binder.
Yeah.
Right.
And he thinks that by reading in the account of what was written in college level English about a non-educated or lowly educated Hispanic person, that he understands their intentions and what I think we kind of beat to death the fact that this is incredibly laughable, but
it really is.
I
hope everybody's laughing.
I think we're at the point of being able to wrap this up pretty quick. I want to hear the rest of what he says about this, and then I have just a final thought about that, and you can put in your last little bit too.
Adjective or an adverb, that's a word you didn't need to use.
Optional
I can say, these are my brown glasses. I can see these are my really cool plastic brown glasses. I didn't have to say the cool brown plastic part, but my additional choice of optional.
Okay. Try saying the well is deep and leave out the adjective and see if you can get across the meaning in that sentence. That's he as an English teacher, this offends me. I'm no big scholar, but I learned enough to teach high schoolers English, and I know that is just offensively wrong. He he had some intuitive sense about how adjectives are used in layman's terms, and he, without even any basic understanding of the fucking grammar of his own language, he's making these generalizations.
As I think that, the lesson here is that as an English teacher, you could probably do a better job of this than he does. Like this fucking nonsense exercise that he carries out, you would do a better job as an English teacher. But still arriving at the same bullshit results, no doubt. Your just would be better. But it just, it's optional words, right? That's a tricky phrase. That's a tricky.
I personally think he has enough of a command of language and presentation that I think he knows better than this, or he would if he thought about it deeply enough. But I think he's either just bullshitting or just didn't deeply think about this point because he realized this is just a way he can get a point across.
Maybe that's it, eh? Yeah. All right.
Words will tell you something about what I believe about my glasses, and maybe even something about me. So I'm also looking through scripture and through my case books at the kinds of adjectives that people use. What kinds of optional words do they use? It tells me something. Another thing I'm looking for is how a suspect will expand or contract time. In other words, if you're describing 4 hours of activity, what will you skip? What will you include? It'll tell me something about either what you think is important in those 4 hours or what you don't want me to know about in those 4 hours. So expansion and contraction of time is something you can also look at in scripture. If I've got a gospel account, I can look and see why some gospel authors will stop at this event and take time to expand it and other authors don't. It might tell me.
Really?
From this exercise,
okay.
He didn't manage to imply that these all have a theological goal based on what they include and don't include. But anyway, all right. I have some thoughts about this, but I'll let you go first.
Right. You're going to let me go first?
Yeah. If you want
to. So I mean, no, you go, because now I have to recollect.
Okay.
I was.
Well, first off, I just think this whole thing obviously is bullshit. He's reading a lot between the lines of how you use pronouns and adjectives. He's totally whiffing what adjectives might possibly be used for in a sentence, clearly. And let's just bury and forget the fact that we're talking about languages that he can't possibly understand. Let's forget that part. Let's just pretend he's just doing detective work with things written by eyewitnesses or possible suspects or whatever. That's all complete nonsense. By the time you get to contraction and expansion of time, what they add in, what they leave out, this is so speculative, so open to just like reading between the lines. All I can picture, these detectives aren't necessarily super educated, but they have some kind of knack for word, probably, or there is some detective in the department who has a knack for words, and they are probably salesmen. That's what that's probably part of your nature of being a detective. You know how to pin someone down and get them to admit to things and stuff like that. So you take people who have this command over the language and over the room with another person in it. You take some poorly educated person who got pulled off the street, doesn't know dick about writing. And me working at my job, there are a lot of people who just do not know how to write an email or a memo or whatever. And they are going to trip over themselves a little bit. And sometimes people will ask me for help with that. If you take somebody who writes probably worse than anybody who is in my office and basically is not even junior higher level writing in some cases, you stick them in a room and say, write down what you experienced or what your point of view is. And then you have these officers who probably already have some kind of point of view, or at the very least, their career is going to look a little bit better if they infer this person's guilty. And you have them hovering over every word that person's writing, looking for what they can draw out of what he did and didn't write about, what adjective he used to describe his friend. The whole thing is just so sleazy on its face. It's a little bit of a gross grift when it's applied to this. It's absolutely, it gets me furious on behalf of people who get dragged into police departments by detectives and gotten to do things without a lawyer present and the cameras potentially off. The amount of advantage that might be taken there that's implied by what he's saying just absolutely disgusts me. And I know it has to happen some places, probably as a matter of practice in a lot of departments. And that it's filthy. I don't mean to rain on the parade of look how silly his biblical scholarship thing is, but it's gross, but the same grossness speaks to just sheer stupidity of it when he tries to apply it to textual scholarship.
Well said.
Gee,
I
that just
think
got to me. Sorry.
no, that's good. And maybe I'll just like, so the proper way of doing this, the way that scholars work is we're not, when you read a document like the New Testament and you want to understand what the writers are trying to do, the way, yes, read it carefully. Yes, make sure you read it from start to finish. Don't skip anything. Read it over and over again. Those are all things that scholars do. But you know what else scholars are doing? Scholars are reading like all this other Greek literature to try and get a handle on how the New Testament fits within Greek literature, because the best way to understand it is to compare it to what the things that are closest to what it is. That's when I do my work, not so much so in the New Testament, but in like the Hebrew texts, I am looking at comparative literature as much as I can find from other sources, as many as I can get, just to get a sense, just to provide me a better sense of understanding what's happening in this text. That's what scholars are doing, right? And it's hard and it's time consuming, and the payoff for it, for the amount, the number of hours you put in, I just, what was it, my I just as an example here, my friend Joel Carrico, he's an Old Testament scholar at a seminary down the road from where I live here. He's been on my channel once or twice. One day when we were chatting, just shared with me, meanwhile, here I am. No, he says, meanwhile, I am over here collating prices of cattle and donkeys in 3rd century papyri from Egypt. Right? Like, this is what scholars are doing, is digging through, super boring shit half the time. Like, tons of these documentary texts to give us a stronger sense of just the world, right, in which they lived, and how these things fit within it. So, like, it's always been offensive to me, the way that Wallace hand waves at critical scholarship. And and one of the reasons for that is because, I mean, it's a couple of things. It's the detective version of the businessman trope, who is good. If you're a good businessman, somehow you're good at everything. That's why Donald Trump is president. Well, this maybe not why, but that plays into it. That's why somebody thought it was a good idea to let Elon Musk do shit, in the U.S. federal government. This is the detective version of that, right? I'm a detective, and because I'm a detective, I can do these other things, which sound tangentially like what you're doing as an ancient historian or a philologist, but I can do it better. Like, fuck off. Seriously. I am happy just to finish by saying fuck off.
I think that's an appropriate ending. So just, I like to think in analogies a lot of times. When I hear you talking about people like combing through these texts, something with the price of goats and all this mundane stuff.
Prices of goats and cattle. Yeah.
They put in all the training to do that and spend all the time that. Do you ever feel like the person who spent a ton of time learning the guitar, but instead of learning the chords, somebody else just picks it up and starts wailing on it and trying to act like they're a rock star like this? He's not even learned the basics, and here he wants to just jump straight to all these big dramatic conclusions. It's gotta be super
absolutely that. It's me who has never learned the guitar, taking the stage next to Eddie Van Halen and going, I'll show you, Eddie, how to play this thing. And without a hint of self-awareness, just going nuts and wailing on it. You're right. That is perfectly apt.
All right. Before we go, do you have anything that you want to share in terms of, you should go check out his channel. I'll put a link in the description. I haven't done that yet, but I'll do that. Anything else you have coming up that you want to pitch or send people toward?
I'm starting to try and pitch the book everywhere I go, because it's coming out on August 15th. I have a new book coming out. It's called God's Propaganda, Pulling Back the Curtain on What the Bible Wants You to See. I'm really excited about it. It'll be available on Amazon for starters, I believe, and then we'll see. But yeah, look for it, August 15th. On Saturday, I will be on Dapper Dinosaur's channel with my friend and producer Vishanti, doing a Billy. Have you done anything from Billy? You just did Billy Carson stuff through Wes Huff, right?
I think we touched on him, yeah.
So I'm stuck doing Billy Carson nonsense. Would it shock you, Zod, to learn that Billy thinks that evolution is nonsense? So
I would be quite surprised if he didn't.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm doing over on Dapper Dinosaur's channel on Saturday afternoon. And then on Saturday night, my own show, Budget Scripture Saturday, with Nitty and Dr. Tapioca Weasel. We'll be back at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern. So that's what I have coming up. I've been sick this week, so I have done very little. But I'll have another live stream on my channel next week too.
Well, I really appreciate you showing up for this.
Yeah, this was fun.
In any case, but especially considering you're sick, I appreciate you being willing to do that. And
I
everybody, please check him out. If you do want to message me, Kipp, any links that you want me to just throw in the description, you can do that, and I'll toss them in there so people can know, listening can find you. So
awesome.
All right, I think you had a pretty good one-liner, punchy one to wrap up, and I kind of got us tangled in other stuff. So go ahead and deliver that, and we'll finish up. Your last
fuck off. Was that it?
It was along those lines. Have a good night, everybody.
All right.
Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue y la casa de la bachata. Voy a cantar esta canción con mucho cariño de mi corazón a la República Dominicana, la casa del merengue, la casa de la bachata. La, 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 la casa del merengue. La, 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 y la casa de la bachata. Música, 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 te traigo música, música, música.